Welcome back, friends. I hope you all are doing fine and preparing well. Today is one of the important sessions in our literary theory section, which is post-colonialism. In your exam, at least 3 to 4 questions always show up. So in that case, this particular section is extremely important. And here in this session, we are going to cover almost everything and whatever they have asked in the exam. So, are you ready? Great! Let's begin. Think about this: when an empire ends, does its power truly vanish? Or does it leave behind deep marks on culture, politics, and even how people see themselves? This is exactly what post-colonialism as a field of study explores. It is the critical examination of colonialism and imperialism, focusing on how their legacies continue to shape societies long after the colonizers left. Pause here and note this. It was asked in exam. At its heart, post-colonial criticism rejects the universalism of Western literature. Instead, it highlights cultural difference and diversity. It celebrates hybridity, the mixing of cultures and polyvalency, the openness to multiple meanings, both of which resist any attempt to flatten identities based on race, class, or nationality asked in exam. Post-colonial theory stands on 3 pillars: abrogation, resistance, and assertion, and it was also asked in exam. It breaks down colonial authority while affirming the voices of the marginalized. Now, here's something interesting. Post-colonial theory borrowed the skepticism of postmodernism toward grand, universal frameworks, but turned it toward a specific historical struggle: the exploitation and domination of empire. That's why post-colonial studies focus on both post-colonial nations and post-colonial identities, always asking how colonial knowledge shaped both the colonized and the colonizer. Can you recall who is considered the patron saint of post-colonial theory? Yes, Edward Said. His Orientalism in 1978 exposed how the West systematically imagined the East as exotic, backward, and inferior. This became the cornerstone of the field. Alongside him, Gayatri Chakravorty Spivak introduced the concept of the subaltern, those left without a voice, and her idea of strategic essentialism, where marginalized groups might temporarily unite for political resistance. Homi K. Bhabha, in The Location of Culture, published in 1994, gave us the idea of hybridity, that cultures are never pure but constantly shifting, unequal, and intermingled. And don't forget Frantz Fanon. In The Wretched of the Earth in 1961, he described colonialism as psychologically destructive while also calling for revolutionary struggle. But post-colonialism is not just theory, it is also literature. Ngugi wa Thiong'o, author of Weep Not, Child in 1964, the first English novel from East Africa, later wrote Decolonizing the Mind in 1986 asked in exam, where he argued powerfully for linguistic and cultural decolonization. Aimé Césaire's Discourse on Colonialism, Chinua Achebe's There Was a Country, and J.M. Coetzee's Waiting for the Barbarians in 1980 dramatized the scars of empire. And here's a key point to underline: The Empire Writes Back by Bill Ashcroft, Gareth Griffiths, and Helen Tiffin, published in 1989, helped establish post-colonial studies as a recognized field asked in exam. Other thinkers broadened the horizon. Dipesh Chakrabarty's Provincializing Europe in 2000 reframed Indian history. Derek Gregory's The Colonial Present traced how colonial power continues in modern geopolitics, and even art criticism joined the field, with R. Shivakumar's work on Santiniketan as a post-colonial context. So, what does all this mean for us? Post-colonialism is not just about analyzing the past, it's about understanding the hybrid, contested, and ever-changing forms of identity in the present. It celebrates diversity while exposing hidden structures of domination. And through thinkers like Fanon, Said, Spivak, Bhabha, Césaire, Ngugi, and Achebe, it teaches us that the legacies of empire still shape our world today, but also that resistance and transformation are always possible. Imagine taking the English language, once the tool of empire, and turning it into a weapon of resistance. That's the spirit behind The Empire Writes Back, Theory and Practice in Post-Colonial Literatures, a book published in 1989 by Bill Ashcroft, Gareth Griffiths and Helen Tiffin. Pause here, it was asked in exam, so mark it carefully. This book is often called one of the foundational texts of post-colonial studies. Why? Because it gave scholars a framework to understand the literature that came out of formerly colonized nations. Instead of seeing this writing as a secondary echo of European culture, the book showed it as a radical critique of Eurocentric ideas about language, literature, and authority. In other words, post-colonial texts don't just imitate, they resist, they reshape, and they reclaim. Now here's something fun. The title itself is a pun. It plays on Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, but also draws on Salman Rushdie's phrase from 1982. The Empire writes back with a vengeance. This clever twist captures the idea that colonized voices are no longer silent. They write back, challenging the canon, questioning power, and creating new hybrid forms of expression. Can you recall what they meant by the mighty forces acting on words? The authors were talking about language itself, how it can both constrain and empower post-colonial writers. English, for instance, carries the weight of colonial history, yet writers bend it, reshape it, and fill it with their own cultural rhythms. This tension becomes the very energy of post-colonial literature. By doing this, Ashcroft, Griffiths, and Tiffin didn't just comment on literature. They helped establish post-colonialism as a distinct field of critical theory. They showed how it connects to bigger debates about identity, power, and cultural production. So the next time you think about post-colonial text, remember this book. It marked the moment when the empire's language was turned back against itself, reshaped into a powerful tool of resistance and self-assertion.